Welcome to another 5-star edition of Props to Consider and Then Maybe Bet. I am your host. I am the paragon of virtue. I am Lou Betya, joined in a very long overdue collaboration. One of my favorites in the space, the man, the myth, the Stargaryen, MMA Fox. John, thank you for finally doing this. We were supposed to do a show a while ago on the Club and Sub. I don't know. I think you had like a last minute thing that couldn't happen. And we tried to do this once, but finally the universe has brought us together. How you doing? How you feeling about this card?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Lou. It has been a long time coming. I'm pumped to come on here and chat about it. The card is, I got to be honest, I think it's a decent card to bet on. I think to watch, it's one of the less inspiring that we've had in a while. You know, there's a couple really good fights, but look, I'm not a discriminator against WMMA in general, but indeed the 4 WMMA fights that we have in particular in this card, all of which are fights that I just cannot see myself enjoying. Maybe the Vivi Maya fight, but it's pretty ugly. And the rest of the card, a lot of weird dynamics here. But I mean, it's UFC. We get to gamble on it. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's what matters. So I'm pumped, and I'm pumped to talk about it.
And worst case scenario, if you don't love the undercard, Washington, Oregon will be on. So you can always flip back and forth to that. Should be a fun game. So before we start, guys, if you are watching, please like and subscribe. That whole disclaimer. If you haven't watched the Club and Sub, it's one of the few pods I get to watch every week that I enjoy. Not because of John, it's just because Danny talks so much. He's so elaborate with his words on the show. But that's a great pod with those two guys. Good fun. Doesn't take forever to watch. Easy watch.
Some have likened him to a young JFK.
I like him to a young Robert Kennedy more than JFK. Whereas I'm like Ted Kennedy. If I have to be in that family.
He lived the longest.
Well, Keith Richards has lived a long time too. But before we get started, one thing I wanted to ask John for the viewing audience, I like to try to educate you, the unwashed masses that watch the show, is that, John, you have a background in crypto. And whereas I have dabbled in the Bitcoin world when I got it at 300 and then sold it too young. And I made all sorts of, I made money off it, but not as much money. We have two kinds of camps in the MMA space, at least on the extremes. There is the only bet winners camp, and there is the I did my job and beat the number camp. And, falling in between is kind of, I guess, the colossal battle we make as gamblers, like what value actually makes sense. So how does you, with all your crypto knowledge, which is something where you have to watch the markets like crazy minute to minute, how does that affect you, or did it affect you, like, as you started to put the way you do analytics when you come up with, like, what's a perfect number for a fight?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I would say it's ironic you bring it up because it is something that's impacted my game for the better up until, I would say, this year. I've had a really rough year betting MMA, and something, I did an audit fairly recently of my results from the year. And something I just noticed is I kind of, not even intentionally, and I think I mentioned this to you in a chat with you the other day. It wasn't even intentionally, but I kind of started diverting away from the market-based strategy that I've always used when it comes to betting, and just focused more and more on tape, which is where I think I have less of an edge. And by that, I mean, I don't think tape's irrelevant. I do tape for every fight. But I think there are people, and there is a camp of people that believe tape's the only thing that matters, and what you can gain from tape is all that matters. And that's never been what's worked for me. And I kind of leaned into that this year, and actually have had bad results because of it. So I've tried to get out of it. And so in terms of markets, I don't really come down on either side of the argument you just mentioned. I mean, I'll tell you this. I will tell you that pick winners is just wrong. Objectively, it's just it's just bad advice. Forget about gambling, investing advice, whatever. It's like saying, oh, I'm buying NVIDIA after it went up 50% in 2 months in January. It's like, okay, maybe it goes up another $10 from here, but there's way more risk to the downside. When it comes to like beating the number and how markets work with that, I don't use my knowledge of markets like equities and crypto to focus so much on beating the number. I want to beat the number at the end of the day. Look, you're going to make more money if you get the best price, right? That's what matters. But what I'm looking for with it is inefficiencies. So it's like, I'm not going to go into an entire tangent and lecture on, how to trade, but like something you generally want to be in markets contrarian. Now, I'm not saying you want to be blindly contrarian, like everybody's doing this, so I'm automatically going to do that. But generally speaking, most things that are common market knowledge is priced into the market. Like if you're thinking of something in your head when it comes to crypto, let's just say, and a real brief thought here, like the Ethereum merge, for instance, that was a huge deal last year. The Ethereum price rose like crazy heading into it. Everybody started buying it and like, oh, it's going to spike after the merge. Price dove after the merge. Why? Because as soon as the knowledge of the merge became public information, people started buying it. They priced it in immediately. And so what I believe the markets has a tendency to do when it comes to MMA is they'll look at one thing, like look at a fight where someone's got 20% takedown defense against a wrestler. And they'll be like, oh, I think minus 400 is a great price here. It's not pricing this in enough. And it's like, well, no, it's completely pricing it in. The question you need to ask yourself is not whether you're getting an edge on the wrestler with a takedown defense. It's, is the market missing anything else in the fight? Is it missing it on the side of the guy that can't defend takedowns? Or is it missing something else that makes it more dominant on the other side? And so that's something that I've had a lot of effectiveness with, is kind of looking at what the market is pricing and trying to see whether or not there are aspects of a specific fight that the market is missing. Just like you would if you came to trading stocks or crypto, you know, will that like buy, let's just say buying, 2022 was a terrible year for crypto. If you bought Ethereum in July of 2022, which was the worst year for crypto in 4 years, if you bought it at $890 when nobody else wanted to buy and everybody was selling, you made a great buy. Why? Because some people sucked it up and said, okay, even if it goes lower, that's fine. I'm willing to hold it at this point, but it didn't. So that's kind of how I've used markets to my advantage. It's kind of trying to identify what the betting community is pricing into the market and not bet on that, because betting on that, you're not getting an edge. And ultimately that's what we're looking for, win or lose, and try to find something that they are not seeing in that particular fight.
I love it. And this plays into something we talked about before we went on the show, is how psychologically, people don't want to bet overs in fights. Right. They want to bet unders. They want to see violence. And because of that, they think they're getting a great price on an under. When the reality is it's already being marked. You're already paying 25% markup for what it should be, because they know you don't want to bet overs. So when you get the people in this space who are the overs gang, who like decision props, you're typically getting a little bit of better price than you usually would. So I like that.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, like violence, people talk about, I like violence props here, but it's like, okay, if you laid minus 450 for Al Hassan Pifer to not go the distance last week, it didn't go the distance. You won, but you had an 80% implied indication there in a fight that was, up until the submission, was a fairly tepid fight. It didn't look like a fight that was finishing 82 times out of 100, in my opinion.
Well, I was already on. I was on retainer for Pepe that if something bad, that I was supposed to drive to Philly and if he didn't get the sub, I was still supposed to go to Philly and correct him.
Take him out.
Hey man, got a lot. I was like, well, I mean, if he's not looking, I guess I got a shot. But but no, I agree. And this is another thing. I'm pretty harsh on some people about this. I hate these juice parlays because you're already taking a volatile sport. You're taking, 2 minus 500s. And I don't have a problem with parlays. Like lottery ticket parlays. Hey man, it's exciting to have a $5 parlay, $10 parlay that can pay 20 grand. Do you expect to win it? Of course not. But if that's how you just want to have oh man, I got 10 games on the slate. I'm going to, great. Yeah. But you're not basing your living off hitting that parlay. So but when you make these juice parlays, why are you doing it? Because the odds that you your win rate have to be 92% long term to hit, and that's hitting parlays, not each leg. That's hitting not really, but if you're parlay,
you have to be plus EV on both legs. I mean that to be profitable, right? So
right, I don't want to bring up I don't want to. I know I took a lot of shit for this the other day, but the Jacob Malkoun parlay leg. Look, did he look minus 500 in that first round all day? I'm not arguing that. My argument is it's a volatile fight, and you have a guy who is not known for striking. He has one path to victory, and that's the grappling. And God forbid something goes wrong. So I just personally don't like to bet personally. Doesn't mean don't do it, but personally, this is not financial advice on the bottom of the screen. I just don't personally like to do that. Now, look, what happened was a very fluky, weird occurrence, but it's still a volatile sport where weird injuries happen, where point deductions happen, like, which, obviously we'll get to later in the show. Like, and, the last thing I'll say on this topic, and I'll leave it to you with this, is you said that one of the biggest things that makes this sport volatile as opposed to other sports is the nature of being one-on-one. This isn't like losing a receiver. This isn't like losing like your point guard. This is just, there's only one person got in the cage. Unless the ref is on your side. We have.
But that's the thing though, right? Because it's like, if someone shows up sick and you don't know they're sick that day, they may have a career worst performance and you're like, oh my God, I made a horrible bet. And it's like, well, we don't really know because there's a lot of random variance. The fact that it's a one-on-one sport means there's a lot of random variance in each fight. And it's something why I take a lot of issue with people when they try to draw like broad sweeping conclusions about one fight result. It's like, you're capping it based on 1 out of 100 or 1,000 results. To take one result and then paint I had huge value, I didn't have huge value, and say that definitively. It's like, well, how can you say that definitively? It's like Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling, their first fight. Sterling looked horrible, career worst form. And everybody was jumping to your point to parlay Peter Yan. He's like, how could it go any different? I bet Sterling in the fight because I'm like, I don't see how it could go worse. The guy's been destroying the best fighters in the world. He couldn't possibly look worse than he did in that first fight with Yan. It's just, people just they like to feel, especially when they made the right bet, feel like it's the only thing that could have ever happened. They were right. And when they made the wrong bet, be like, oh, well, variance. Whereas it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, that's why we do it. And as long as you're careful and not banking on these like safe plays, you can sustain.
There's no such thing.
There's
as someone who bet Kanaka Murata last week,
who closed at minus 4,000 for those watching the show. She closed at minus 4,000. Yeah, you see it all the time, man. I bet soccer. There's favorites that are minus 1,000. Next thing you know, they get a red card the 10th minute. That bet's dead. You just never know. But we're here for some props, and I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. If you've never seen the show, we're going to go over 3 props on the undercard / everything but the main event, and we're going to talk about the main event, and then we're going to close with a flourish. Everybody's favorite bet, the Yambag special. Always excited when somebody who's never made one of these bets has to give their first pick. I still remember the glee in James Blissett's face when he realized he had to do it, and it went from like grumpy to like, oh, there's logic here. I'm like, yes, James, welcome to the dark
Do you
side.
have the split the foul odds in front of you?
They're all plus 2,000.
Okay, perfect. That's perfect.
So although what's funny is the one that I'm going to pick and that you're probably going to pick, if it's plus 1,800, I wouldn't be shocked. Can you name? You want to know the one? There's one fight where I didn't see it as plus 2,000. It was plus 1,800 on DraftKings. Do you know what it was? I'll give you a hint. It was last couple of years, and it was at heavyweight.
Plus 1,800.
You got to think of.
I would have guessed it was like an Insegecute fight.
You got to think of. Surprisingly, it's always been plus 2,000, but you got to think of who was in the fight as to why it wouldn't be plus 2,000. Who's the most notorious heavyweight cheater you saw the last couple of years? He's no longer in the UFC.
Heavyweight cheater.
In fact, he just got knocked out in boxing. There's your big hint.
Oh, Greg Hardy.
Hardy and Ty Burrett.
There you go.
And it just didn't go long enough for him to cheat. Plus 1,800. But anyway, John, what is the first prop you have to consider for this card?
Yeah, Haley Alatang, Chris Gutierrez. Cool fight. I took a position on the money line here as well. I'm on the Alatang plus 350. I do, though, in terms of props here, something I think is probably being overlooked in the fight is just, the kind of firepower Alatang has here. And it's one of the reasons I like him on the money line. Like, actually, if you look back, and I'm not going to break down the whole fight since it's obviously a prop show, but you go back to when he fought Danabacker, he won a decision. He won a decision despite being outstruck by 50 strikes. Why did he win a decision despite being outstruck by 50 strikes? Because he just throws with heat. The guy has a lot of firepower, and when the rare times he lets his hands go, he tends to land very, very hard. We're in a small cage here. I really think when you corner Chris Gutierrez against the fence, the man is very, very available to hit. Now, to his credit, he does move very well. He's obviously had good dexterity in his legs, great footwork. But when he's been put against the fence, he is there to be cracked. And I do not think that Chris Gutierrez is a very durable fighter. And the first round with Alatang, he tends to bring a lot lot of firepower out with him. The prop I like here, and it's a long shot. I don't know how much your viewers like me giving out like a big prop here, but
are you kidding? That like, dude, people have come to the show and give out -120s, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? What's wrong with you?
I like the Alang KO one. It's plus 1200. I think, look, it's a 7% implied probability. Do I think it hits? Probably not, but I really think he's going to have openings here to land heavy, especially if he tries to take the path of least resistance, which would be the wrestling. It'll probably result in a couple of engagements in tight. And I think if he gets 3 or 4 heavy engagements in close, that pays the price off in and of itself. So I like the KO1 for Haley Alang.
So you said before the show we would have a different position on this fight, and we do not. I didn't play round 1. I just played the KO. And just to add to your point, you're mentioning how you get him against the cage and he's there to be hit. He's also there to be taken down, and it's a smaller cage. So I think that's going to help Alang at least close the distance, avoid those leg kicks. I think he can rack up a lot of top time. And then to your point, I know Chad and Helliger is not like, he's borderline UFC caliber. Like, I understand
Borderline's
that.
generous.
He's borderline contender series caliber. But Alang was not just content to have top time. I mean, he was raining down, busting him up. So he's not just going to sit there and be like, cool, I've banked 2 rounds. Like, I'm good with it. Because he had banked 2 rounds against Dan Helliger, and he was like not content. So I just like the idea of a guy who I know has the cardio to go 3 rounds, will actively be on top. I mean, I think he has to get takedowns for this prop to hit. You seem to think he can do it standing. I get that.
I do.
I think the path of least resistance is take him down and do it. But as long as he closes the distance, I like him a lot in this fight. And I think this line in general is just, it's gotten way out of control. Like, I'm wondering, like, is this something we don't know?
The funny thing is, I actually like when it opened at Alang -200, and I missed the opener because it happened overnight, I guess, and it moved. But the next day, it was Gutierrez -175, and I was like, I really want to bet Gutierrez. Like, if it goes to -150, back to -150, I'm going to bet him. And then it went the other way, and I'm looking at it like, I mean, Chris Gutierrez literally can't get off his back. And if you get him on the fence, he's there to be cracked, and he's not super durable. Like, why think Haley Alang throws with heat and wrestles? I don't see how the line is possible, to be honest.
I'm with you. So this is why I have an emergency prop. This is why I write 4 in case the guest has one. And I know you don't have the other 2 because we talked about the fights, but my lowest one here, and I'm just going to give a shout out to Just Win Baby and blame him when this one doesn't hit, because we both talked about it. We both kind of like it. I'm going to play Dakota in the distance. I don't want to play a KO or sub here because I can make a case for either. I know.
Can you make a case for sub? Yes,
and I will make a case for sub.
Okay, I'd like to hear it.
Okay, so Dakota.
I don't mean that as an insult, by the way. I'm just saying I would.
Dakota in the distance is plus 285. Now, so first of all, it's just a get right fight for her. They clearly like her. I don't know why. Yoder got a 4-fight contract, by the way. Why? Is she jobber to the stars? Is she like Special Delivery Jones? Like, just going to be the person fed to like the Undertaker making his day? Like, I don't know. But I feel like, why would you sign her to a long contract? Big layoff, a lot of injuries. She really doesn't have a striking game. Her legs are there to be kicked, and that's what Dakota does really well. I assume Yoder's going to try to grapple here. Whereas I don't think Dakota is some world-class, has world-class takedown defense. I don't think Yoder's good enough to like consistently get her down. I think Dakota can get up. My submission, the reason I can say I can see a submission here is we haven't seen Yoder. If Yoder's gassing from all these takedowns, she could start shooting sloppy and maybe the next there. It's also not priced highly enough for me to get off in the distance. The submission, I think, was like plus 475 or something. What? It wasn't like
what's KO?
Oh, I'm wrong. Plus 900. KO's 425, subs 900.
I was gonna say, because like I literally just had this conversation on my podcast with Pepe before I came on. I'm like tempted by Dakota inside the distance, but like the thing is, I feel like it's pretty KO reliant just because I mean, Mackenzie Dern got like on top of Yoder for 3.5 minutes and didn't sub her. And like, that's kind of where my head is. Cause I think she's going to kick the ever loving shit out of Yoder.
I have lost 2 bets on In the Distance by 2 different Russians getting their first submission, by Volkov getting a submission, and then not Russian, but Uzdemir getting a submission, when I'm like, why don't I just do In the Distance? And I'm like, oh, it was like 40 cents different in price. And I'm like, all right. And then I lose them both. So I'm like, the hell with this. I do have a couple of other weird props coming up, but that's why I just want to play In the Distance for this, because God forbid,
no, fair enough,
Yoder gasses and shoots bad and the neck is there. Like, I just don't want to lose. If she's going to finally win inside the distance, I don't want to get it wrong, like the method wrong. But I do feel this is such a setup fight for her. And
oh yeah.
And narrative wise, which I don't love these things, we don't have to talk about narratives in terms of fight betting, but like, you start off a card with a certain fight. Typically, it's because you want a response. You want the crowd involved. Like, you like setting the pace for the show. They try to have exciting fights, especially more on pay-per-views where you have a bigger crowd. But still, you try to have fights that try to get people excited early. I don't know that I think of excitement when I think of Ashley Yoder, but I do think this is just a setup for Dakota to get right. And it's hard to argue that Yoder really, I don't even know if this line is wide enough, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I don't want to say free square, but it feels like a free square. It certainly
does. I said free square about Murata last week.
But again,
I'll tell you that.
It was a fight that closed minus 4,000. So, and I watched that fight and I watched the back and I'm like, yeah, she won this fight, man. Like, she won that fight. But
I thought so. I did think so.
I'm on the Dakota In the Distance. I'm glad that you're at least debating it. And if Pepe's debating it, also, like, all this makes me feel better about it. What's the next one you want to go to? I know the 2 that you have listed. So
Darren Elkins, TJ Brown.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I really like Darren Elkins here. Just generally speaking, I feel I have this. It's not even a theory. It's actually something that I've now kind of proven right with data. And that is that the market tends to really dislike grapplers that are really bad at striking. They're just always looking for a reason to fade him. Like guys like Pat Sabatini, for instance, Darren Elkins, just grapplers with really ugly striking optics. The thing is, you always dismiss the biggest part of those games because those guys tend to be very, very proactive about their grappling. They don't sit around a distance that much. And so I see this fight and I kind of get the logic around Brown. He's younger, he's a better athlete. We've seen Elkins take some shots. The dude's 39 years old. But then I'm like looking at it and I'm like, man, Elkins is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Everybody's acting like this guy everybody's acting like he's 1-4 and been put out 4 fights in a row. But no, he got mauled by Jonathan Pierce. But then it's like, would Jonathan Pierce not completely bludgeon TJ Brown? Like he definitely would.
500.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, there's got to be some recency bias in there. And so I started to look at it a bit closer. And I'm taping TJ Brown. I'm like, man, the guy really can't defend takedowns. And like, this is a guy with 30% takedown defense. And it's not a guy with 30% takedown defense where it's like he got taken down 10 times by one guy. Eric Silva took this guy down 3 out of 4 attempts 2 fights ago. The dude just has a terrible takedown defense. He has terrible get-ups, and he makes bad mistakes on bottom. And on the other side, we got Darren Elkins, Darren Elkins knows what he's good at. He is going to come out there, and he is going to shoot, like his life depends on it. And Darren Elkins is a pretty slick submission grappler himself, He's fought a lot of the thing is, what people don't realize is Darren Elkins has been fighting, for the most part, very, very good competition for like the last 10 years. Whereas TJ Brown's been fighting garbage, for most of his time in the UFC. Charles
Rosa.
Yeah, that's his best win, And I think Darren Elkins would destroy Charles Rosa. And so I think, so I love the Elkins money line. Now, look, I will say, entirely possible Darren Elkins shows up at 39, is totally washed and loses. I get that. It is live.
And he's coming off of surgery. So,
yeah. But I do think he has the tools to like actually dominate this fight. But the age is enough that I would never bet the money line big here. What I do like is, though, TJ Brown tends to compete really hard early in fights. And he tends to start to wilt and lose confidence as fights go on, especially when guys are grappling him hard. And so like a guy like Elkins, who's going to grapple him hard for all 3 rounds, who is super aggressive and a decent submission grappler. I really like Elkins sub the Elkins sub props on the back end here. Hold on, I just had it up. Where did they go?
I got round 3 is 2,000, round 2.
Yeah, so I like both the 2 and the 3. So I see 1400 or 1600 round 2, 2000 round 3. I like his sub generally for the fight, but I think those have a lot. And like, maybe do one of these things where it's like if you want to bet it, you stack like a half unit or like 0.25 units on the submission and then just like ladder it down that way. But I really like the opportunity for Elkins to get a late sub here. Like my view on the fight is Brown is either going to torch him in the first 2 minutes of the fight, or he's going to go into the damages world and bad things are probably going to happen to him down the stretch here.
So I haven't bet this yet. I just want to add first. Elkins round 3, by the way, is mythical creature. He's not GM3 level, but he's kind of close. But as I've been like capping this fight and taping it, like the one thing that stood out to me, because I love Elkins, like I try to take my bias out of it. He's just one of those guys like you love to root for. Who are the guys that trouble him the most? They're aggressive strikers that give him no room to breathe.
Who can defend takedowns?
Jonathan Pierce, just tons of striking and then got it to the ground. Cub Swanson, who I know is not getting knockouts a lot at this stage of his career, was right in his grill, throwing strikes immediately. Landwehr, in his grill, crowding him, throwing strikes immediately. The Ryan Hall fight was kind of weird. Oh, yeah, by the way, he lost to Volkanovski. Like, I mean, this is a step down, like you mentioned, but TJ Brown is not a pressure-first fighter. He tries to be patient. He looks for spots to go for takedowns. He's not even, like, super aggressive on the ground. Like, Eric Silva is just really bad.
Terrible.
Just really bad,
Terrible.
Man.
And like I bet, that's the thing. I bet TJ Brown like plus 115 against Eric Silva. And it's like 2 fights ago, he was an underdog to Eric Silva. And now he's minus 200 against Darren Elkins. Like, what are we doing?
So, all right, I'm going to get to my next one. Now, I don't know what you have for this. You just said your position has changed on this fight. So last time out, when we last saw Shyz versus Lera, I had a bet on fight starts round 2. It might have been plus 105, but it was right around even money. And I liked my odds until I didn't. And then I liked that it was a no contest because I got the bet back. But I made that bet thinking Shyz is not some massive finisher. And we know what Lera is going to do. And I think, I want your opinion on this because I think this is like the same with Kudiyaba. I know he didn't just fight, but like, I think these guys, they go into camp and they're like, look, if you can be patient, if you can learn how to do these things, if you can pace yourself, execute the game plan, you can win. And I think they have good camps. And then the second the fight starts, everything gets forgotten. It just gets like primordial, like, and like I have to, like, it's like what they do at nature. And like Lera just going to go out there and spam 900 spinning kicks and be gassed by the 45-second mark. So I want to think that this fight can get out of the first round. And if it does, I think Shyz kicks his ass. The round 2 submission is plus 800. I just can't see this. I can't see this fight getting out of the second. You had the decision prop last time, right?
I had Lera decision. I had fight goes the distance, and I had over.
Okay, so at least you were like, then you liked my fight starts round 2. Then
yeah, I did.
I just don't know how Lera, even if they like try to pace him, I just don't know where he's better other than explosiveness in the first 2 minutes. And I kind of think Shyz is tough. And I do think now he knows he can submit this guy. So it's going to make more sense for him to go for the grappling. But I like the round 2 price. As I famously say on the show, I like round 2 sub because it pays more. So I'm going to go with the round 2 submission. What's your view?
I don't mind that, honestly. My view, so like I going into the last fight, and I know Edgar Shyz is not very good on bottom. I've seen the guy controlled there a bunch. And like my view on why I took Lera decision and overs was if Lera fights smart, it's very possible he could just hit 3 takedowns here and just float on top of him for like 12 minutes. Like I have seen not great grapplers hold Shyz down, like Jesus Aguilar. He is not a very good grappler. I know he's in the UFC, but he is not. And he held Shyz down fairly easily.
Well, now he's a knockout threat.
Yeah, apparently. Apparently. But what bothered me about that fight, and I just talked about this in the intro. I don't want to draw like a huge sweeping conclusion, but what bothered me about it was my read was if Lacerda gets on top of him, he's definitely not hopping back up. He's going to spend a lot of time on his back. And instead, he got up quite quickly, which was pretty disconcerting to me. And then on top of it, to compound matters, Lacerda started chasing another takedown basically as hard as he could. And I'm watching it and I'm just like, the amount of energy, first of all, if Chyz can consistently get up or not, and I don't know if he can, but if he can, then the ground pass non-viable. And if he's going to chase takedowns this aggressively, he's gonna fucking gas again. It's like he's not like there is a way to attempt 10 takedowns in a fight and not expend like max energy and redline. He was not doing that. He was completely redlining chasing the second takedown. Now, I think to your point and to your bet, I actually still think it's going to get to round 2 more often than not, believe it or not. Just because with that approach, and you have to imagine he's going to be a bit more cognizant about the guillotine this time, right?
I mean, I don't know that, like, I wonder if the brain just turns off. Like, I mean, it might be one of those things where you just have to get in like a flow state. Like, you just have to clear your mind of everything and you don't hear your coaches. I think some guys just fight like that.
And his flow states just go.
His flow state is like the dancing, like, the black and white, like, remember the guy with the grinder and the pet monkey, like in the 20s? That's what I think is his flow state, dude. It's just that. I don't know.
I'm not betting the over, but I do think it starts round 2 more often than not. I don't mind the big number at the Gutierrez sub.
Did you think you were going to get that reference on this show?
I did not.
Old-timey, and you know what I mean, right? Like,
I do.
A lot of people are going to watch this and be like, "The fuck's he talking about?" But like,
we're too old.
All right, they'll know. In 20 years, when they're doing content, they're going to be like, "The fuck are these guys talking about?" Like, All right, that's my second one. I know that your last fight involves Simon and C-Rod. So what do you have there for your prop?
Yeah, I like the C-Rod sub here. I also like the 2-3 there as well, but I just like general sub more because I actually think C-Rod could sub him in any round here. I like C-Rod in the fight in general. Just think he's a more tested fighter. I think his game's a bit more coherent than Simon's. Like, so far, Simon's kind of just gotten by on raw physicality at bantamweight. The thing is, there just aren't that many guys you can do that to unless you're like a Marab, and I assure you he is not a Marab. He's basically fought like the worst that you could possibly fight. Like, his best win is Mana Martinez, who no longer in the UFC, not very good.
And on the other hand, multiple times in that fight.
Yeah. I mean, it went to a majority decision. C-Rod, on the other hand, I mean, it's funny because like I was Reyes Cortez, who he beat on Contender Series. I think I would favor against all of the guys that Simon's fought in the UFC and his Contender Series fight. Obviously, he gave JSP a decent fight, and he obviously beat Raul Rosas. I think he's a better striker. But with regard to the sub prop, Cameron Simon is a very bad grappler. He's kind of gotten by because he's fought pretty bad grapplers himself thus far. Yeah, I know people will call Terrence Mitchell a grappler. Terrence Mitchell is not a good grappler. The guy puts his neck in a lot of places it shouldn't go. I actually thought I was extremely impressed with the way C-Rod counter grappled Rosas that entire fight, even round 1. And I kind of think, first of all, I think there's 2 potential ways that this could go. For a sub, I mean, not the entire fight, but just in terms of C-Rod getting a sub. I don't really think Simon can stand in the pocket long with him. I think his really only path to victory is not only path, but I think his best path to victory is to kind of hang on the outside and try to point strike, but it's not really his game. And I think if he hangs in the pocket with C-Rod long enough, he's going to get dinged at some point. And I could see him shooting in, and C-Rod's got an absolutely nasty anaconda. Guy's got a crazy squeeze for the weight class. But the other way is C-Rod just, if C-Rod does have trouble dealing with him on the outside, him just pursuing a grappling first game plan, and I could see him easily getting on top of Simon here. And just, I mean, look, he took Raul Rosas' back and held a round on his back. I could easily see him getting there and subbing him that way. I just think he's got a big grappling edge, and especially a big submission grappling edge. Doesn't mean he'll use it. Maybe he'll just strike for 15 minutes. We don't know. But, we're basically getting, plus 350 now for a guy who potentially sub could look plus 100 if he takes the fight, if he approaches it in the right way. So yeah, I like C-Rod sub a lot.
I found it hilarious how bad his grappling looked against Obi-Wan Shinobi, the Pillow, Steven Kozlow. Kozlow took that fight on like 3 days' notice.
He's a regional bum.
He's a bum. He's a bum who answered my DM when I asked him what his name was about. And it was, I'm not going to repeat it because it was like 2 paragraphs. Well, there was no space, but it was like 2 paragraphs of 1 run-on sentence that if you had to guess why that was his nickname, you'd probably guess correctly. Like, it sounds as strange as that sounds. And this weirdo on 4 days' notice was shooting from 5 feet away, 7 feet away, getting it to the ground every time, and then just gassed because of all these takedowns. I like C-Rod a lot in this fight too. I don't want to spoil anything. I may be talking about this fight a little later in the show. I may be talking about it later in the show. But my last prop before we get to the main event. So this is where I'm supposed to just blindly bet all my Philly guys. This is where Luke will yell at me. He's like, all right. When I did Club and Sub, he's like, all right, Lou, tell me why Jeremiah Wells is beating Court McGee. And I'm like, he's not. And then that's probably why I haven't been back on the show. I mean, it's not the only reason, but it's not the only reason, but it didn't help. So I like the Pereira sub here at plus 725. I know Pereira's not really going for a lot of subs, but my problem with, and we don't know what Pereira's going to look like at 185, but I think I just read he was cutting 45 pounds to get to 170. Man. Definitely hurts his cardio. So I got to think his cardio will be better here. He's already jacked, so his strength is probably going to be all right. Now, Petroski's a strong dude. Petroski's striking is okay. I don't love his cardio. I think the cardio concerns are a little overblown because he fights through his cardio pretty well. He did all right against Turman in the 3rd round. But my concern is, man, he takes forever to beat some of these scrubs, dude. Like, Gilmore is the worst. Like,
Hugh Yazong.
These are not good fighters. And Petroski just like, and now, like, look, now the Maximov win. Yeah, he beat him in a minute, but like, even that win is not aging gracefully. I don't love Turman. I know some people in the community, I think you're one of them. Like, maybe you rate him a little higher than I do. Like, I don't think Turman's a scrub, but he's all right. He's
great.
He's not great. He's not great, but he seems like kind of weirdly like tough. I don't know, but Petroski kind of struggled in that fight. And like, now you're facing, this is Petroski's best opponent. And now you're facing a specimen who I think is going to have better cardio, definitely has better striking. And I do think because Pereira works the body, I really think he's going to gas Petroski out. Petroski's going to want to get this to the ground. I think Pereira will feel all right with it, especially against a tired opponent. And I think at plus 725, it's worth the poke here. So, look, there's a couple things that have to come into play. The one of them is that Pereira's cardio is going to be better at this weight class. I have to assume it will be just from cutting less weight.
What's ends by sub? Fight ends by sub.
Fight ends by sub. I'm on fight odds right now. So let's see.
They might not have it. It might not be up yet because I don't think that.
Hold on. I also have DraftKings up because I am a professional. And let's see. Exact method of victory. It is, that one's not up yet.
Yeah, I actually I actually don't hate your logic there. I think it's like fairly reasonable.
Your check's in the mail, sir.
But if fight ends by sub is like plus 300 ish, I wouldn't mind that because I do sort of think like if Petroski wins the fight, he's probably going to have a number of opportunities to get a submission as well. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like I've been all right with Petroski, and I've been like this is where I have to get off the train. So we'll see. Petroski. But I can see what you're doing.
I bet GM3 against him. That was sickening.
I bet GM3 also in that fight. But all right, but let's get to the main event. We got Steve Bev against Edson Barboza. You start this one off, my friend.
Yeah, so it's an interesting fight. I actually bet Barboza last week at plus 165 and cashed out this morning. So I have no bet on it now, just because I do think stylistically it's generally a favorable matchup for Edson. I think he's a better technical striker. He's a better tie striker. Manages distance a bit better than Sadiq. He's a bit quicker, I think, or at least the last time we saw him, he's a bit quicker. And I think durability is kind of a wash between the two. Sadiq's a guy I just haven't rated very highly throughout his run. I feel like he's been very overrated because he ran through a bunch of guys early on in his career. But at the same time, the reason I cashed out is, number one, I mean, he's 30, Barboza's 37, and he's a shop-worn 37. The guy's had a long, long, long career and taken a lot of damage in that career. So that's concerning. Number two, I looked back. My initial read on it was, okay, Yusuff's not going to be able to kick with him. That's basically how he beat Gutierrez, was leg kicks. But, I looked back and I rewatched Barboza Burgos, and Burgos started ripping leg kicks about 6 minutes into that fight, and Barboza did not like them one bit. And Yusuff throws some heavy, heavy leg kicks, which concerns me. And then, even more, just zooming out, it's like Barboza, he throws a lot of high kicks, a lot of spinning kicks, and with Barboza's bottom game, and Sadiq, he's a Lloyd Irving guy. This is a guy who has been training grappling his whole life. Barboza throws a kick and slips, which happens all the time. That's probably a round. He probably loses a round right there. So with all of that in play, plus the age, plus I really think at the end of the day, the UFC's probably making this main event for Sadiq. I feel like that's enough for me to not want to fade the younger guy with an older shop-worn guy who potentially could get stuck on bottom. I will say, in terms of props, I do have probably a bit of a contrarian one. I actually like the goes the distance, and I like the decision line on both guys. Sadiq's decision line, obviously, it probably seems more appealing because I think there's a narrative out there that Barboza is this turbo gasser. But what's funny about that? You actually go back and look, you can't really find any instances of Barboza gassing. The guy's got multiple third-round finishes in his career. The only time he really slowed was the Giga fight, and Giga was doing a ton of body work in that fight.
Oh, so I was wailing him in the yeah.
Yeah, so that's my point, and I'm thinking to myself, I feel, I don't want Barboza's money line because, let's just say he does end up on bottom a couple times. That's the fight. But I do think it's going to be fairly competitive, and I think his cardio is probably underrated. So I think there's a decent chance it heads to a close decision. And while I think the money line may be more or less right, I feel like Barboza being 17 or 16% implied to win a decision is kind of crazy. I'd have it more plus 300. Plus 500 seems a lot. But like I said, I like the Sadiq decision as well. I like goes the distance in general here.
I love it. That's what I'm on. I actually have Yusuff decision at plus 275 written down. I love all the time props. I think this under it's kind of weirdly priced. I mean, Yusuff is not really known as some kind of explosive finisher. I don't count choking out Don Shanis. Let's. I don't need that in my my tape study here. But he's patient. He does do leg kicks, but he stays out of trouble. Everything I'm reading is the improvements on the grappling. Great. That's just going to chew minutes off the clock. He's not wrapping up crazy choke sequences on the ground. I think Barboza and can definitely stay safe on the ground.
Oh, yeah, Barboza's a black belt. He stayed safe with Khabib.
He's fine. He's fine to stay safe on the ground. I don't think he's going to really be going for takedowns here unless his leg gets compromised. If he is getting his leg kicked enough and he's getting compromised, maybe he will. But this is a dude, I agree with you, man. His power carries late in fights. I mean, the Burgos fight on a hurt leg, that power was carrying, man. So I think Yusuff, he fights smart, kind of stays out of trouble, stays at range. And if you think a fight's going to just stay at range and a guy's staying out of trouble, that leads to overs. So,
or potentially, to your point, my instinct is Sadiq probably won't have an easy time getting Barboza down because he does have really, really good first level takedown defense. But he is old, and it could just turn out Sadiq is getting fairly easy takedowns, or Barboza's confidence starts to flag. In which case, you might just end up with 12 minutes on the back end of the fight with Sadiq kind of sitting in guard and half guard.
I like when people think that's boring, and I want to bring this one up. Let's say I was holding a Jimmy Malarkey decision ticket against Prado, and everybody's like, "Man, this fight's really boring." I was standing up applauding in the third round. I'm like, you don't let him move till the ref stand. This is the most exciting thing I've ever seen. I'm just watching the clock. Just tick, 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 tick. Yes. Stand him up. Take him right back down, Malarkey. That's what he did.
Does it feel like to you whenever you bet an over though? Like I feel like it's very rare I bet an over and it's not sweaty, you know?
Of course it is. You're like, you're dying inside, man.
It's like, can you just lighten up on the ground and pound just a little bit? Like just a little bit.
I mean, I like, especially the Contender Series where like, dude, I suck at betting the Contender Series.
Oh, horrible.
I ended on a flourish last night, 0 for 2. I bet a guy we interviewed and I bet a guy with great hair, and maybe that wasn't probably wasn't my finest moment as a gambler, but then I'm watching the one dude finish Torres, and I don't know if you were like an old school, you remember Dr. Depp Steve Williams, but like this dude gave him the Oklahoma Stampede. He picked him up, he ran him around the cage, and then as soon as he dumped him, the guy like immediately got up, and I'm like, okay, you just expended 30 seconds of energy for no, like literally got up and started elbowing him. I'm like, all right. You might want to, let's workshop that one. But so John and I both on overs for the main event. Man, we're agreeing a lot more than I thought, man. We're gonna break the internet with this one. So we are at the final.
Hopefully we break the banks.
I hope so. I do like the overs a lot there. And we are at the final part of the show. Guys, if you watch this for the first time, number one, shame on you. Watch the show every week. I put a lot of work into it. Number two, we're talking about a point deduction. I say Yambags. It's a New York term. My dad used to say it. It means getting kicked in the balls. Doesn't have to be a ball shot. It's just funnier that way. It's what's made me the internet sensation, apparently, that I am at 45 years old. But there's a layup on this card that I'm going to give out. John, do you have any fight that's not the layup that I have?
I mean, I have a fight. I don't know if it's the layup. I like the Inez and Martinez Yambag special here, I think.
Ooh, I like that too.
I guess my view is if we're going to be betting on point deductions, first of all, I want a kicker on one side. It helps to be in opposite stances since there's a lot more head clashes that tend to happen.
Do you watch the show? We talk about this every week. Weezy and I have concocted. Yes, we love that.
And I think if you watch Inez's history, when he's faced kickers, like after he gets kicked a couple times, he tends to pressure aggressively. And like, I don't think Martinez knows a way to fight that's not kick heavy. The thing is, when the guy gets out of kick range and is in the pocket with you, suddenly those kicks that are supposed to go to the body start finding a home a bit lower than the body. And so I think there's going to be some opportunities to potentially kick Yanez low a few times here. And also on the other side, Yanez seems like a hothead to me, man. This dude, he is an angry fucking guy. He is. I wouldn't be surprised if he does something stupid.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, you give me opposite switch stances, give me kickers, I'm in. Cameron Simon for me. This is the layup. It's because he commits a foul every single fight he's in. It's about that. He commits a foul. I mean, look, I'm gonna bet both. Like with the Simon one, if it's not +2, if it's not +2,000, I'll laugh because they may make the case now. Like, dude, literally, he's had a foul in every, whether it's been called or not.
He lose a point with Kozlo? I think he did.
He lost the point with Kozlo. He lost the point with Martinez.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he did. Yep. He did.
And he committed and the Terrence Mitchell's just very bad. So like he didn't have time.
I like that. That's a good one.
I mean, and like not only that, but like another thing that I like is when you get guys that are like up and comers, like raw talent. Like I think C-Rod's more refined at this point in his career. Like, I feel like C-Rod has an identity when he fights. Like, he's a grappler that has striking, but he has a game plan, and he has his game is molded to a certain, like, style of fighter. I feel like Simon flails his arms a lot and calls it mixed martial arts. Now, that's not to discredit him, because it's much like his mentor, Duplessis, who kind of flails his arms a lot, and he makes it work. Because he's accurate with these wild strikes. He kind of knows when to get these weird, sloppy takedowns that are horrible form, but work. Like, and it's been good against inferior competition. Simon's going to get some resistance now. I don't trust his cardio. And this dude and every foul is in play here. The low blows in play, hit to the back of the head, the cage grab. Dude, he could do all three at once. We might get like a cage grab, eye gouge, like with his fingers in the gloves all at once. Like, it's possible.
I support that. I support that Yambag.
Yeah, the culture. See, I'm glad. And now you said it on air. Look, I'm excited you said it on air. I can't lie to you. It was more exciting when Mike's MMA pick said it on air. Because I had a side bet with Brady. Do you think he'll actually say it? He goes, I don't think he'll say it. I'm like, I'm going to get him to say it. I said, I don't know if he likes that level of hullabaloo or ballyhoo, but I'll get him to say it. So, well, that is it. We have covered the props in this card. John, thank you so much, dude. Very easy to talk to. Very fun show. Both wearing hats. What's not to like? John, tell the people what you're doing. Advertise the Club and Sub, which I personally vouch for it being an awesome show. I'll be watching it later tonight because that's one of the few pods I watch.
Yeah, I co-host the Club and Sub podcast. My boy Danny Lags. We go live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the Club and Sub podcast YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox. Yeah, I love fights, love talking fights. You ever want to hit me up in the DMs and chat fights? My DMs are always open. So yeah, Lou, thanks for having me on tonight. I had a really good time, and yeah, I'd love to do it again sometime.
John does not like ballyhoo, by the way.
I'm all about ballyhoo.
He likes tomfoolery, but not ballyhoo. Guys, good luck this week. My guest next week, this is very exciting because next week is the 1-year anniversary of the show for the pay-per-view.
Who you got?
I brought back guest number 1. He never does shows off the Mayo Media Network, but Paul Shaughnessy will be making his return.
Nice.
My man Paul will come back. Dude, I watch other NFL shows, so like this is like a loyal viewer. I'm getting like, do you ever watch their NFL stuff?
I listen to most of their NFL stuff.
Yeah, Cuffed is a maniac.
Yeah. Oh, he's the best.
Well, the greatest moment
he's a Jets fan like me.
I know he is. The greatest moment of that show ever was him complaining about the Monopoly tickets and then Pat Mayo literally lighting a cigarette. He lit the Monopoly tickets and then lit a cigarette with the flames off the Monopoly ticket. Like the most evil shit I ever saw. And it's the funniest shit ever. I hate the Eagles. I am a Giants fan. I hope you guys beat the Eagles.
I hope so too.
At least
I hope so too.
I would love to see it. I would love to see you guys have a decent season. I can't say I'm confident, but good luck, Jets. Guys, good luck on your bets. We will see you next week. Take care.
Peace.
Little football.